Hey everyone, it's me Lone, hope you're doing alright, and we finally got the official gameplay trailer for Starfield. They kept it right to the end of the Xbox Bethesda showcase, but Todd was there, he did his thing, and I want to give my impressions of that trailer. I want to go through everything, and throughout this week, I will be uploading individual kind of breakdowns of the gunplay, the character creation, etc, etc. But right now, let me give my overall thoughts about the entire Starfield specific presentation anyways, and I got my notes to the right of me, so I'll just be going through those. First of all, you really do need to watch the 4K version, like the stream quality throughout that entire stream, because it was 1080p, but also the actual bitrate just seemed to be really low. It was incredibly blurry and pixelated for most of the trailers. So just looking at Starfield on that view, it didn't do it justice at all. Make sure that you go back onto the Bethesda YouTube channel. I'll include the link in the description below. Watch the 4K version because it looks so much better, 100%. Also as well, I think the amount of gameplay that we saw, like the length of the segment, was just about right. It wasn't too long, it wasn't too short. Of course, would I have loved to have seen more? Absolutely. I think any fan of Bethesda would like to have seen more, but I think it was just about right. It was a busy showcase. I have my thoughts about the showcase as a whole, but there was a lot of developers, a lot of time that needed to go around. You didn't want to drag it on, so I thought it was just about right. So let's focus on the early game mission in Crete, so on Crete. The first thing that I noticed, and this was a constant kind of bugbear for me, at least throughout the entire gameplay presentation, the colors just feel very washed out. It feels very like the first mod that I'm going to install is going to be a saturation mod whenever modding is going to be a thing on Starfield, because it just seemed a little bit dull. And I thought, or maybe it was just the first mission on Crete. Maybe that was just the planet and the perspective and the look they wanted to go for. But it was like everything, like New Atlantis, a lot of the different locations just had this kind of desaturation to them, just washed out look to them. And to be honest, I wasn't the biggest fan. So I guess that's just the look that they're going for in Starfield. But I hope there are some options, at least in-game, to be able to boost your own saturation, but if not, we'll have a mod that does it eventually. So that was the first thing that I noticed. So I don't know if anyone else agrees with me, but I thought it was a little bit washed out. The frame rate was definitely low. Even when you re-watch the 4K version, it's clear it's at 30 frames per second. It doesn't have a 60 frames per second version. And they were probably going for kind of more resolution focus, again, when you look at that 4K trailer. So I'm hoping that it's not so hard to get the frame rate up to 60. Obviously, the game is still being worked on. It's not out yet. Hoping that when it's actually out, the frame rate can get to 60 frames per second, especially if you have a high-end PC. But it's one thing that you had to notice, like especially during some of the combat and gunplay segments, you could see the frame rate dropping maybe to mid, maybe low 20s. It's really hard to tell, but it was obviously 30 for most of it. I really like the visor that, you know, as you walk along, it shows you information about certain things, whether it was like the plant or the mineral that you found on the wall. I like that. I think that's a nice little touch. It definitely makes use of your UI a little bit more. One of my favorite bits about this segment, actually, and not just the Crete version, but throughout the entire presentation, the creatures and the aliens look freaking awesome. Like, I think a lot of effort has gone into making them look cool and unique and what you would picture aliens to be, but in a different way. Like, it's not just like, oh, typical aliens, right? But like they look genuinely unique, like inspiration from dinosaurs in some ways, typical Bethesda kind of Mirelurk bugs. I think they did a really nice job. They look, you know, really different, a lot of variety there. So I'm keen to see what the rest of the animals and creatures look like in the game. The one thing that I will say is that, so I saw a little bit of the mining segment on Crete. I hope that doesn't become a big part of the game. I genuinely hope that it's not like Fallout 4 levels of junk collection to build up your settlement and all that kind of stuff, because I love Fallout 4, but that was my one kind of downside about the game. I didn't like constantly collecting junk. I hope that it's not constantly collecting minerals and mining in Starfield. It could be, I don't know, they can get the balance right, but to be honest, I'd prefer to avoid that as much as possible. Gunplay and combat, it looks about right for a Bethesda game. I don't think anyone was expecting this crazy gunplay, oh, the guns feel great, it feels like a Call of Duty or an Apex or whatever it might be. It looks like a Bethesda game, all right? So a little bit on the jankier side, but still improved from Fallout 4, I believe. The guns they look like they feel all right to use in the hand. The shotgun was definitely a highlight for me. And again, I think it was an improvement on Fallout 4, but I don't think anyone was expecting this kind of, you know, incredible, crazy gunplay. It's a Bethesda game, so we kind of have to accept that. I really do like that there is a hacking minigame, or the Digipick as it's called, to get to the weapon box. I'm glad that they brought that back in some capacity. You obviously have it in Elder Scrolls, you have it in Fallout, and now Starfield has a version of it, so that's really cool. The spaceships, when they fly in and drop enemies off in real time, that looks really cool. You've had that since Fallout 3, right? Like, it's not like a brand new thing, but at least it adds a little bit of different dynamic to the gunplay and to the combat. The fact that there's a jetpack is... I love it. I love that there's a jetpack. I'm keen just to be flying around, shooting enemies, and it will just make exploration a little bit more fun. How it's actually going to affect the traversal, like, are you going to be able to glitch a little bit easier, get up to higher platforms or locations? They're probably, I don't know this yet, but I'm assuming that if there's a jetpack, there might be a way to improve the reach of your jetpack or the effectiveness or how long you can actually fly for, kind of like in Fallout 4, but we'll see. It looked fun anyways. And then we got to the story segment. So the last group of space explorers, I kind of like the concept. Like, I'm huge. I don't know if anyone of you know, I'm huge into space videos and what's out there in the galaxy and in the universe. So the fact that we get to play that role, joining Constellation, I think that's really cool. The city of New Atlantis looks great. Again, this is when I saw this, in addition to the Crete gameplay, this is where I start to think, oh, this looks really washed out. Like, New Atlantis, you think with a big city, colorful, that's what I was expecting. Not so washed out like this. So again, that just might be me personally, but that's what I thought. I really love the watch, like the Pip-Boy watch kind of thing. It seems like that's going to be your kind of like main interface in the game, unlocking doors, doing stuff like that. So that's a neat little touch. Again, calling back to Bethesda's roots in the Pip-Boy. Bethesda's roots, you know what I mean. It is Fallout 1 and 2, but still. The facial animations, holy crap. Like, I know that it's become a bit of a meme, a bit of a joke right now, that facial animations and voice acting well, not the voice acting, but just like matching the voice to the facial animations in Bethesda games, it's typically not been that good, okay? Even if you look at Fallout 4, especially because Fallout 4 had the voice protagonist and it really kind of highlighted that, it's never been that good. This was seriously improved. Is it like amazing, like the most incredible facial animations that you've seen out there? No, of course not. But in comparison to what Bethesda has done in the past, you seriously need to give them credit for this. It looks phenomenal. They actually look like real people talking to you and not weird facial animations. Of course, we got a small snippet. It could be different in the actual game itself, especially when you're talking to random NPCs and not actual just like proper characters like we saw in this trailer, assuming they're kind of main characters. But still, I thought it looked really good, and hopefully we see that kind of permeate throughout the game. Now, the story itself, like I said, I like the fact that you're part of this, space exploration group. The story does feel a little bit basic, I'm not going to lie. It's like, oh, what's out there? You got to look for the artifacts and look for their secrets. That seems to be the main driver in the game. So there just needs to be many more side quests to make it a bit more interesting. That can't just be the main thing. And of course there is going to be. It's a Bethesda game, we expect it. Like, how many people are writing home about Skyrim's main story, for instance, or Fallout 4's main story? It's not the main factor here, but you do need something to push you along, interesting enough to push you along. And I think that is there. At the very least, we're not getting, oh, go find your son or your daughter or whatever it is, because that would have been bad. So this is at least something a little bit different. The Crimson Fleet, I can't wait to join them, man. I think they're going to be a cool faction. So awesome. I think they're a cool looking faction that, yeah, maybe in a second playthrough when I'm doing a bad run, I'll join the Crimson Fleet. But they look to be fun to verse against as well. There seem to be lots of characters as well, like cool, interesting characters. Again, we got a small segment, but there seemed to be a lot of variety. It wasn't just like 2 or 3 characters talking. There were a fair few that you came across. There just needs to be enough dialogue and enough backstory and background for these characters, but hopefully we get that. Floating in space combat. I don't know if any of you saw, there was this one segment where you were floating in this kind of chamber or I don't know, this room of some kind, and you were still shooting. That was freaking cool. I had to point that out. And again, the creatures in the game just seem awesome. Some of the shots of like the tall creatures, the alien looking dinosaur creatures were sick. Like, that was a huge highlight for me. And then we've got character creation. Look seriously improved, and this is probably because the facial animations generally and the face models have been improved in Starfield. Clearly the work on the creation engine has come through, and we can see that in this trailer. But just looking at the character creation and the facial models and what you can change, it does look really good. I'm seriously impressed. Again, Fallout 4 was probably lacking on that front, so if we get our hands on it and I can create an awesome character that looks like me or that looks really cool, then I'll be happy. Now, holy crap, the RPG elements in terms of character creations, they're here, all right? We need to get our hands on it. As I've said before, you know, treat it with a grain of salt. But you've got backgrounds with starting skills. You've got optional traits that have advantages and disadvantages. You know, you've got lots of different costumes and outfits, skill systems that you unlock as you level up, and then you rank them up as you use them. So you're not just, you know, leveling up, but you're also having to focus to improve your skills further, like Skyrim. I love it. I absolutely love it a lot. It's kind of like a melding together between Skyrim and Fallout and traits in New Vegas. Freaking awesome, man. Like, let's go. I think they've put a lot of effort into it. I think they've taken to heart what a lot of people said about the character creation and the mechanics and the skills and all that in Fallout 4, right? Because they really did dumb down that game for sure. So it seems to be coming back strong in Starfield, and I'm all for that. Now, the settlement outpost building with survival and resource generation, you can hire characters to keep it up and running. Hopefully this is a thing that you can just set up to get your resources to be able to build out your ship, and you're not having to constantly mine on your own. But I just don't want this to be as kind of like, you know what, Fallout 4, that's unfair. Fallout 4, it wasn't a big part of the game. I barely touched the settlement building in that game, but I just hope that it's easy to get your resource generation up and running so you don't have to constantly mine. That's just my one thing. We'll have to see more of it. But then the next big thing, the spaceship building and the spaceship combat and gameplay, hell yes. It looks great. It's clear that a lot of effort has gone into this. You have a crew, you're customizing your ship. It just adds a different dimension to the game. So you're not just like, you know, oh, I'll fly to this planet, no in between, and I'm just on the ground. It actually makes you feel like it's a proper space game, right? And you have ship mods that can improve your health, the looks, the performance, because you're actually shooting pirates and spaceships in space. So cool. Like, again, does it look a little bit on the janky side? It does, right? We have to get our hands on it. But the fact that you can be in space, you could see the planets, what looked like Saturn, like you had a planet with rings. It's obviously not Saturn, but the way that the bullets were firing, the ships were exploding, like how it looked beautiful. Okay, it looked beautiful. Look at the 4K version. I'm telling you right now, and I seriously thought that it looked like a blast. Even just like exploring planet to planet, or just like in the atmosphere, I think will be fun enough on its own. But the fact that you can actually shoot down pirates and all that in spaceships, I think that adds a different mechanic. And again, it does depend how fleshed out the spaceship building is, like how many more weapons you can get, how many different companies there are that provide you parts, as Todd was saying. So want to see more, but it looks gorgeous. It looks like a lot of fun. A little bit janky, but you know, who cares? And how big the game is. It is clear that there's going to be a lot of procedural generation in this game. You do not have 1,000+ planets without some level of procedural generation. You know, look at No Man's Sky, right? What's important here is that, one, there are enough main cities which are actually pre-rendered and built by Bethesda for us to explore and you know, just walk around and do side quests and all that kind of stuff. There needs to be enough of those. It can't just be like 4 or 5. There needs to be a bunch of them, and I'm sure that there will be, but I will say that. But 2, yes, have procedural generation for us to explore planets, but make sure that there's still interesting stuff to find. I don't just want to walk barren planets with no secrets and just have endless waves of enemies and stuff to mine. That is my biggest thing. It needs to be interesting. There needs to be stuff to discover. It's probably how the artifact is going to be incorporated. Like, you can find extra artifacts exploring a planet. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But I still think it needs a little bit of something. You know, you can't just have procedural generation and expect people to enjoy that. But that being said, the biomes and the locations do look cool. Again, a little on the washed out side, but they do look cool. It looks to be a lot of variety and diversity, especially with the creatures, as I said. And I just hope there's enough interesting stuff to find. So there needs to be actual cities with NPCs, on top of the planets with secrets, etc., etc. So those are all my thoughts, my quick thoughts and impressions on the Starfield gameplay. I'm very keen to know what you think in the comments below, fam. But until next time, this has been the Lone Vault Wanderer. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.